but the stories that I heard about that, it was very traumatic to our citizens of Pearsall that got in a home and within 6 months they were out. The builder, they get their money and they lose it because of this balloon payment. But I was just making sure that these homes are affordable for them.
Yeah, I don't,
That's not the builder, because the builder's not on the financing part.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, it still has to be able to be qualified, like if it's HA,
Oh,
HA approved,
yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
I'm asking, yes.
Okay, and Councilman Leal, I'm gonna ask you to ask for the floor because, Councilwoman Gardner requested a question. Go
When you
ahead.
were saying, no down payments, are you trying to target like the teachers and maybe like the big, like the hospitals and the big organizations here, or is that gonna go across the board for everybody?
The financial organization is a credit union that focuses on public service
Okay,
and primarily teachers.
yeah, because we work for
So
school
you know
districts,
who
so
it is.
we know that
Yeah.
it's a big thing for the teachers, for the doctors and
Yeah.
nurses that travel back and forth and,
But it'll be for everybody.
okay,
I'm not sure, Paul. I mean, it'll be for everybody. They'll probably market it mostly for teachers because that's what their marketing is, but it will be for everybody.
thank you.
But again, we all have to work together.
Yes,
And
sir.
the issue, I'd be interested to see how the financing was done on those things, because I know back in the 80s when they were selling homes, there were some really interesting finance.
And Steph, I'd like to say, my history as a banker, I started banking in '85, and things have changed a lot. There's a lot of laws in place that protect the homeowner, especially Texas is very
Yeah.
protective of that. So not reflective so much on the builder, but more so on the individual and the creditor. That was, and they had some products that were easy to step into, but if you didn't know the whole small print, you could get burned by that. So things have really changed, laws have really changed to protect borrowers these days and that. So anyway, if that kind of helps. It's really, the borrower is really underwritten the day one. And usually the loan goes 30 years without a balloon. There may be some interest adjustments, but those are pretty much fixed rate mortgages now, for a full term. So those kind of things typically don't happen.
Absolutely. And
Typically.
yeah, pardon me. Yeah, and for me, I want to see 256 houses out there. So putting up 10 that don't work is not the way to do that. So, the one thing I've heard the whole time is we need housing, we need housing, we need housing. Everybody I've talked to. I was having a conversation over with AEP because I have to do all the engineering on the electrical with them. And the gentleman from Spectrum was there. And he was excited about it because he said, wow, this would be great because this would be the first subdivision we could bring fiber to every single home. So it's things like that that make me very excited about the opportunity down here. It is challenging because there hasn't been one in a long time. And we just all have to just work together. You're going to see a lot of me, so sorry about that, but we've got to make sure that it's appropriate and it's all working out well. So the things on the variances the main one has to do with the right of way. Subdivision ordinance says a 60-foot right of way. We all know, we're familiar with that. The property starts at the right of way, but there's a lot of land that's not even, that the city owns, but it looks like it's part of the person's front yard, okay? And so what I'm asking for is a 50-foot right of way. And what that does is it allows the lot to be a little bit bigger that the person's gonna own, and it also helps out on the tax base, and that affects the TERS and the money that goes into there as well. Some people would say, oh, well, when you adjust the right of way, you're adjusting the street width. This subdivision ordinance street width is a minimum of 33 feet, okay? So I could go put in 33 feet wide, curb to curb streets everywhere. But I've blown this up a little bit. This is in that this is the engineering diagram of the street. And it shows you what we're talking about here. On the 60-foot right of way, which is the top one, the paved width I'm proposing is 42 feet. And that would be on the street that goes, that extends Atoll out. Do you have it?
It's this one.
It's this one?
It's the new one you just
My-
put away.
Yours is blank.
It's the one that's folded in.
She got one.
You got one? Okay.
Oh, good.
And so the minimum is 33 feet, 42 feet. The TERS is what makes these things possible. For comparison's sake, Atoll going into the property is 40 feet wide. so it's wider than that. The side streets, what we're asking for is a 50-foot right-of-way, but a 36-foot paved street. Okay, still bigger than before. Pretty much every side street in the city is 30 feet right now. If you go out and look at, around I think it's the elementary school over by the property, Pena is right there, that's 30 feet wide. That's 30 feet wide. And then there's, I think it's Willow, is that the street in front of it? That's 30 feet wide as well. Ash Street is 40 feet wide. So we're talking about trying to make this stand out and be really nice. The deters is what allows us to do that. And it really doesn't affect anything by adjusting the right-of-way, because there's still right-of-way into the property for utilities, has no bearing on the easements that go up front for the utilities either. It just has to do with how big the lot, the ownership of that lot is versus what the city owns. Because the city will, because the city will own whatever the right-of-way is. That's the city property from there. So that's one. There's another rule in the ordinance that says that all blocks have to be between 500 feet and 1,000 feet. I would say that's an interesting rule to have, but it doesn't work very well when you're trying to lay out a more modern subdivision like this. It's good, I guess, when you just do those straight rectangle blocks, because if you look here, block 6, that's 5 lots there, and I think that's going to be about 400 feet in length. Whereas block 12 is 23 lots, and I think that's something like 1,600 feet long. And so it's just adjustment so that we can get the maximum efficiency out of the lots there, out of the property.
You have a minimum what you're requesting?
I could give you the exact minimum would be, 350 feet, which would be block 6.
That's the smallest block?
That's the smallest block, yes.
How many cul-de-sacs is there? 1, 2, 3.
There'd be 3 cul-de-sacs. Mm-hmm.
And the main exit comes out of Athol Lane, or are we looking at opening up on, oh my goodness, what's the?
Vaughn.
Huh?
Vaughn, Pena, and the property behind. One of the things that we've been very fortunate to do is working closely with the city in looking at these plans, because if you took Atoll straight back, you'd end up in city property. There's a little field back there, I think. And so what we're doing is making sure there's pass-through there, making sure there's enough engineering, making sure enough sewer and water, so that whatever happens behind that on city property, we can support it. If you look over here at the end of block 1, lot 19, that's where Vaughn is, so we will eventually have an entrance off Vaughn there. As well as block 5, lot 1 is an interesting situation, because that's Pena right there, and Pena has some interesting attributes, as I can say right now.
Yeah.
So, but the idea is that to make sure that there's good ingress and egress all around once it's built out.
I guess,
Yeah, Councilwoman.
I see that there's a detention pond. I know there's a difference between retention pond and detention pond.
Mm-hmm.
So we went with the detention pond?
Yeah, because I don't, the retention would hold water in it.
Okay.
Is Hector here? No, Hector isn't. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So we talked
No
about
fishing
that.
yet, no.
He wanted to fish a pond.
To go fishing?
You like, yeah,
That'd be
he's a
awesome,
big
but-
fisherman, so, yeah, it's a detention
So
pond.
the detention pond slowly releases it
Yes,
and the retention pond holds it.
yes.
So with that there, who would be maintaining that once the property is sold?
The city,
The city?
yes. And there's actually, you can see in the engineering that's in there, although it's really tiny, there are berms around it, and it does go down a little bit, but we would put all that in, and then we would have to figure out.
What's the cost to maintain a detention pond?
I don't, right now, I don't have it. I don't know.
If you could give me that information. I'm just familiar with the retention pond at the last property that I worked for
Mhm.
here in Pearsall. The retention pond was there and it's owned by the property, but
Right,
it's a lot of work.
yes.
And if that red light doesn't go off, it'll do a lot of damage to the people's homes.
Yep, and so that's where, you know, the thing about this property is that everything flows into that detention pond. And all the engineering for water flow and the hydrology reports are in the engineering that you have. But everything flows there, and that's engineered so that that doesn't happen.
We shared this with our engineering firm, so part of the recommendations, as you receive the plat, recommendations will be coming in from our engineer to make sure that the detention pond and how the water's gonna flow, to make sure that we're not, it's good, we're listening to Joseph and his engineer, but we'll be doing our due diligence.
Absolutely. There's a lot of steps to this. You know, the first one, make sure that you're okay, because I'm not asking for preliminary plat or anything like that right now. I'm just saying, okay, are these variances okay? Because I've got to get your engineers to come back and say, okay, the engineering looks good, then I can put it out to bid and get some pricing in, get the finance plan done, then come back for preliminary plat, master plan approval. So there's a lot of steps to.
Well, I'm for homes. I put that terrace plat back in 2011 because we wanted more housing.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're here today, and I'm sure you'll be here. There's just a lot of questions. We just want it to work out for the city as well as the people. And we wanted to house everyone, because even though not just people from out of town need homes, or people from Pearsall need homes as well.
And you know, what's interesting to me when I talk to the finance people about this, they're like, do you think people are gonna move from San Antonio to Pearsall? I was like, there's so much demand for people here, we need to take care of them first. And then we'll, worry about people moving in. That's what I think.
Councilman Leo?
So I saw that y'all have phase one.
Yes.
So are your phase gonna be going as you sell, or you're gonna build a couple of phases, even though there's still some in the market?
So I will build 4 or 5 houses at a time and see how fast those sell. And then we'll move on down to the next phase once I get some idea of what the, what the absorption is gonna be.
And are you gonna have a model home? They are gonna be.
Yes, there'll be a model home there.
So you'll have a couple of model homes and then go from there.
Yes, so my plan is to start with 4 or 5 houses, building them at the same time. And then, so one of those will be the model, but I've done this before, and usually someone comes in and demands to buy the model. And so I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you can have a model. And so we just gotta always make sure that we're, we have inventory, and, there's always stuff going on.
And once y'all start on the project, just say that there's a demand for higher square footage. Is there room in this plat to, for instance, you say the back layer, you wanna, how when you enter subdivision San
Yeah.
Antonio, the first one start out at 120, 140, and then they go up, well, that was about 4 or 5 years ago, but
Right.
they go up to 300, 350 as you go further back.
These are, the lots are pretty big. They're 75 feet wide up front by, I think most of them are 140s. There are some bigger lots, as you notice up there. It's plenty big for a bigger house if someone wants it.
So someone can come in and want a custom built home.
Yes, yeah. I'm not, I think we need to get some on the ground first,
Bring it up.
and then start going from there. And then if someone says, oh, I wanna be in block 7, lot 21, okay, great, we'll get you something there too. I'm not adverse to it at all.
Part of the new, again, this is be new to Pearsall, part of what you see there is that there are no alleys. So, look at that plan, which to me is
So what? I
correct.
can't hear you.
There are no alleys in there.
Yeah.
The whole plan, you see that. So, and with Pearsall, we don't use alleys anymore, other than now we have some utilities. There's, remember, maybe at one time, I don't know the history, but of course your trash trucks used to run through the alleys, but there are no alleys in that. So that's part of the reason that he's able to get, bigger lots. So.
Okay, council, is there anybody else that has questions? We got a couple, okay, Councilman Trujillo.
Mr. Reyes, just a question. Have we done our homework on, I'm listening to the prices of these homes and the economic development that we're trying to line it up with here in Pearsall, and the income families here in Pearsall. have we done, and have we done statistics on this, that this is gonna actually benefit the citizens of Pearsall? And, I mean, we need to look at job growth as well as economic development
Right,
too.
part of what we did is we did ask some information from the school district and the hospital district. Now, let's say that the median household income, that's all census data as far as, you know, we can get that information, from the census. But really, a lot of this project is gonna be market driven. Maybe Joseph would, I don't know if he agree or disagree with me. But it's market driven. Again, I think, you know, for him and for us, it wouldn't be in his interest or our interest for him to build homes that people here can't afford. I mean, that's just honest truth. And so, you know, on our end, you know, we try to give, and I want the council input as to, okay, what do you guys think people can afford, right? I mean, I can come up with a number, but at the end of the day, I don't know, you know, what people can afford on a monthly basis now. You know, and how that translates into financing and things of that sort. What I think as a city we may wanna consider is start having some sessions and maybe working with our local banks to see how people could improve their credit scores, and we get involved, not necessarily with actually doing work for individuals, but at groups, making sure people's credit scores are okay, make sure they have the ability to borrow money, but ultimately, that's what it's gonna lead to. But we haven't done that as a city, but it's something that we could entertain and talk to our local banks to see if there's, you know, some way they can help us with helping people build their credit scores, because I think a lot of times from what I gather, that's one of the issues, is people don't have the credit to finance some of these homes.
I just wanna make sure that we're looking at this as, statistics that are reasonable for the city of Pearsall, that we say, okay, you know what, so-and-so makes 60K, which I would think majority of the people also, but is this affordable? And this is nothing that we're gonna build, and it's gonna be sitting there because we're not gonna be able to sell it.
You know, that's a great question, Councilman, and I'll say again, from the lender's perspective, you know, if you look at the national average, a starter home is like 280,000, you can look that up on the internet, which, you know, not certainly applicable here to Pearsall. But when we all started a long time ago, you know, $80,000 house was a lot, so $200,000 home sounds like a lot of home, but the great thing about this whole thing again is we desperately need the housing, and not that we're not partners, but the developer is the one that takes all those risks, and so he's the one, you know, don't get me wrong, I mean, we're all in this together, but he takes those risks, and it's his capital and everything else, and the cool thing about that again is his engineers draw the plans, our engineers approve it, so we know we're gonna take over the road, we know we're gonna take over the detention pond once it's approved according to standards, so all this goes step by step by step to make sure that it's all following their protocol, our protocol, so on and so forth. And then when, you know, it is what it is. I mean, with the cost of material and the cost of everything else, he's got to make a profit. You know, that's his incentive. But again, the TERS, because over time he gets some of those reoccurrements back, it's going to be difficult again to attract a developer without this TERS down here, and to finally have someone willing to do that. I think his approach is correct. And again, you know, speaking on behalf of the city, but again, with those size homes, you know, he's not gonna go out there and build a bunch, you know, so that they won't sell, but then we're gonna see. And, you know, we are coming into a slowdown, so that kind of impacts things too, but going, as these things have gone in the past, usually, especially the void of what we've had in new housing, as soon as they're built, I'd be surprised if there's not a contract on them by the time they're done to move into. So again, I think the market, and if you look at the paper at what some of these houses are selling for, in our market, I mean, compared to again, when my wife and I started out, like, oh my goodness, how are these folks doing it? But again, salaries have kind of keeping track, and so anyway, it's a great question, but again, Jordanton's not too much different from Pearsall, a little bit, but again, those houses sold over there, of course, again, the economy was rocking and rolling, while business was going, so I think it's the right approach, starting at this level. With that, is there anybody else that has some questions? You're gonna hit item C, you have one more thing?
Yeah, one more thing on there in the city, the subdivision ordinance requires clay sewer pipe. So I'm asking if we can upgrade that to a more modern Schedule 40.
Joseph's being a little, is it's a joke.
Well,
It's not a joke, but it is in the sense in the fact that clay pipe was popular back in 1976. We no longer use clay pipe. But part of that, we're updating our subdivision regulations. When folks come in, and this is part of what we're talking about with a comprehensive plan, we're talking about things like this. But a good portion of the subdivision regulations were written in 1976. And so times have changed since